We got to go play hard. This game's going to be about velocity, all right? And I often say we got to get bloody. Like, it's got to be that type of mindset. This got to be a physical, bloody game that isn't about, how can we outsmart them. This is going to be how do we out-physical this group.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we will get right into business. We have a Week 8 slate that is absolutely covered up, starting Friday night all the way through. We've had games throughout the week, by the way, all kinds of football to consume, but we have some games that are massive coming up this weekend. So we'll just get right into the previews. No reason for me to waste time pointing you in a certain direction. So what I'll do, ask you politely, if you could just go and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get the podcast. So it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Go and subscribe there so that our episodes are automatically in your inbox when we post them on the mornings at some point here in the very near future. All right, let's dive in. Always College Football Preview Show, our best show of the week. Louisville at Miami. This line is about 13 and a half. It's 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. It's a Friday night clash at Hard Rock Stadium, playing for the Howard Schnellenberger Trophy. The Cardinals are 4-1, coming off a bye, trying to regroup after a disappointing loss in overtime to Virginia. Their head coach, Jeff Brom, is one of the best in all of college football in scheming and making things difficult, but he's publicly acknowledged that the offense has kind of struggled with consistency, a lot of negative plays, turnovers, a run game that's been not great so far, and he's taken personal responsibility, which to me makes me think he's going to have a great plan for this one. Mario Cristobal, these two teams have gone against each other a couple times. Louisville won a few years ago. Miami won last year in a shootout. Miller Moss is the quarterback for Louisville. Been pretty good, by the way. He's got 7 touchdowns, does have a bunch of turnovers. However, if you look at the amount of duress he's been under, it's understandable why he's tried to make some plays that he probably shouldn't make. And then Carson Beck has been extremely steady for Miami. He has been back to his old self from a few years back when he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country at Georgia. Question 1, will Miami's defensive line wreak havoc against Louisville's offensive line? Look, this front is outrageous, okay? Tons of elite talent. High-round NFL draft picks, Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, those guys can take over the game, and they are the engine of Miami's defense. They're deep. This defensive line is stout. They're athletic, and they'll go against a Louisville offensive line that's been, without question, the team's Achilles heel, especially when it comes to blocking for the run. Their ground game's been, for the most part, non-existent. They've been banged up at running back from time to time, but they're in triple digits. They're averaging barely over 100 rushing yards a game. They're not much better in pass protection either. They give up a bunch of sacks. They give up a bunch of tackles for loss. This is a huge issue for Louisville in this game, and Miller Moss might be running for his life. Question number 2, can Louisville win on the outside? Look, they're averaging nearly 300 yards through the air a game, and that's a testament to how good Jeff Brom's system is and how good Miller Moss has been throwing, even though he's under constant pressure. And the brightest spot on this Cardinal offense is their quarterback's accuracy and their receiver duo of Chris Bell and Colin Lacey. Look, Bell is playing at an All-American level. He's 5th in the FBS, averages over 100 yards a game. He's got 4 touchdowns. He's on pace to break a bunch of school records. And Lacey has some explosiveness, can also contribute in the return game. Those two guys are a really nice 1-2 punch on the outside, and they'll put some pressure on Miami's secondary. And then question 3, can Jeff Brom neutralize the talent gap with his coaching acumen? He's done this for a while now. It was not often where he was at Purdue or at Western Kentucky, and he had, without question, better personnel. He doesn't have better personnel in this game. The central question here is whether or not Jeff Brom can mitigate the talent deficit that his team will face in the trenches. There's a massive mismatch up front along both lines of scrimmage in favor of Miami. And I think Louisville's only comparable talent advantage might be a wide receiver, but those players can't be effective if the quarterback has no time to throw. Therefore, you're going to expect a bunch of screens. You're going to expect a bunch of scheme adjustments. You'll expect some movement, some eye violation, some misdirection. This entire game boils down to one single dynamic. Can Louisville's coaching staff and their scheme manufacture an advantage to offset Miami's raw physical dominance on both lines of scrimmage? I'm taking Miami to win. I'd lay the points. After watching Louisville's offensive line, I think they're going to get completely overwhelmed. Unless Braum delivers a masterclass in coaching, this game really shouldn't be that close. But guess what? Braum can and has delivered that on several occasions in his coaching career. We'll go next to noon Eastern time on ABC. The 10th ranked LSU Bayou Bengals take on the 17th ranked Vanderbilt Commodores. Vandy, a slight 2.5-point favorite. Both teams enter with identical 5-1 records. Another layer of intrigue in this game is Brian Kelly, one of the more decorated coaches in the sport, facing off against his former defensive coordinator, Vanderbilt's Clark Lee. It's kind of his protege. Second time they've played each other as head coaches, and amazingly, you have one of the best offenses in the country in Vanderbilt against one of the best defenses in the country in LSU. Vanderbilt's number one in offensive efficiency still. LSU is top 5 in points per game allowed. The quarterback matchup is a terrific one. Garrett Nussmeier has at times made some mistakes when under duress, and that trend has kind of continued this year. He's got some picks, he's missed some throws, he has been also hampered by some injuries, including a lingering abdominal issue, and that has kind of indicated that maybe that's held him back a bit. All accounts say that he's been a little bit better the last week or so, especially coming out of the bye week. But even last week, there were some uncharacteristic misses where he wasn't on the same page with his wide receiver. Maybe that's just a lack of practice time and a lack of reps. Diego Pavia on the other side, true dual threat. His best asset, his ability to break you down with his legs. He's a guy that could, if the opportunity presented itself, could run for 100+ in this game. And last year, he was one of the best quarterbacks when it came to breaking tackles, and that has carried over into this season. He has 350 yards on the ground. He has 14 touchdowns through the year. He has just 4 picks. However, in his most recent outing against Alabama, 2 pivotal turnovers in the red zone turned that game on its head. Question 1, will Vanderbilt be able to establish the run against LSU's top 20 run defense? Look, Vanderbilt's rushing attack leads the entire country with on a per carry average. That is the foundation of their offensive identity. And the attack is multifaceted. All right, you got Cedric Alexander, who's very good as their starting running back. You have an explosive playmaker in McKylan Young. And then you, of course, had the ever-present threat of Diego Pavia. It's a lot like a triple option. And this ground attack will face their toughest test to date against an LSU run defense that's among the nation's elite. They allow just over 100 yards a game and well under 4 yards per carry. And Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator, they've built a disciplined, physical front seven that is specifically designed to get you off schedule and to make life difficult on you while playing behind the sticks. Now, it's a unique challenge when playing against Diego Pavia, because how aggressive do you want to be knowing that if you over pursue, he can take off and really hurt you? This is an offense that has a lot of triple option principles. It will force the defense to be assignment disciplined, have gap integrity, and the linebackers and defensive ends have to be really good with their eyes. And last year, LSU had a game plan specific defense for Vanderbilt. So watch for that. They might look a little different on that side of the ball than they have in the first 6 games. Question number 2, will LSU's offensive line be able to handle Vanderbilt's defensive line? LSU's offensive line has definitely been one of the biggest question marks on their team this year. The struggles are represented with their inability to be consistently successful running the football, the amount of pressure that they've allowed, how few and far between clean pockets have been for Garrett Nussmeier, and that vulnerability kind of aligns with the strength of Vanderbilt's defense, their defensive line. They're a top 15 team in sacks per game. They are really good from a tackle for loss standpoint. They have 2 edge rushers in Miles Capers and Cordray Sidner that do a great job. And the Tigers' inability to establish the run game could create predictable long yardage passing situations. And that's exactly where Vanderbilt's defense excels at creating pressure. And LSU noticed this against South Carolina. They really emphasized the quick passing game. The ball was coming out. I'd expect a very similar plan moving forward in this ballgame. Question 3, will LSU's talented wide receivers create problems for Vanderbilt's secondary? LSU's best and perhaps most capable group might be at wide receiver. They are deep at wideout. They have great additions via the portal in Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson. They have the super dynamic slot receiver in Aaron Anderson. And then Trey'Dez Green is a star. He's 6'7" at tight end and had a massive game last week. He was at times just a red zone weapon. Well, now he's doing a lot of things in the field as well. I expect his role to increase as things move forward. And the Commodores have been pretty susceptible through the air. They've given up a bunch of passing touchdowns, and they have not been elite in coverage at times throughout the first 6 games. Question 4. Will Vanderbilt win the turnover battle and control the tempo? Look, Vandy, they got to lean on a methodical tempo. They got to lean on a dominant rushing attack. They have to grind down the LSU defense. They have to control the clock. They have to win time of possession. And they also have to win the turnover battle. They lost at Alabama because they were somewhat careless with the football. 2 turnovers inside the red zone, one with Diego Pavia getting stripped, the other with an interception that Pavia threw on another promising offensive drive. So they have to be smart in this game because it's an opportunistic and aggressively talented defense that they'll be facing every single snap in this ballgame. I'm taking Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt's offense and the misdirection could force LSU to be a little bit more conservative, and that plays away from their strength. I think Vanderbilt will force a couple mistakes, and I also think it's got a chance to be a very low-scoring game. I would hammer the under in this matchup. Up next at 12 Eastern time on ESPN, it's the 12th ranked Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets taking on the Duke Blue Devils. And Duke, surprisingly, at 4-2, they are favored in this game. And Georgia Tech enters the game 6-0. Their best start since 2011. They just took care of business against Virginia Tech. And Duke, they're 3-0 in conference play. They've won 3 straight. Quarterback duel's a good one in this game. You got Haynes King against Darian Mensah. For Georgia Tech, we know what Haynes King is. I mean, he is the engine of their offense. He's been very efficient with not just his arm, but with his legs as well. Last week, he threw the ball really well against Virginia Tech. He also added it feels like he gets 60 yards a game on the ground and a couple touchdowns every single week. And his performance against the Hokies gave him the school record for most games with both a rushing and a passing touchdown. The first handful of games this year, he's been really good. He's got 9 rushing touchdowns and completes over 70% of his passes. But Darian Mensah, man, he is electric. This guy has a chance to kind of take over the game. It's been on a bit of a tear these last couple weeks. He's thrown for nearly 2,000 yards now, 15 touchdowns, just 2 picks. He can really shred the opposing secondary, and he can keep plays alive because of his mobility. Question number 1, who wins? Georgia Tech's rushing attack or Duke's front 7? Look, Yellow Jackets, they lean heavily on tempo, physical, downhill rushing attack to kind of control the game. Virginia Tech, they went for 270 on the ground. Malachi Holsley has emerged as a real weapon for them as a 1-2 punch with Haynes and King. You also now have Holsley to take advantage of. It's a powerful ground game that will face a very strong test against Duke's run defense that's been very solid all season long. They force a lot of negative plays, so if Duke's front can neutralize Georgia Tech's rushing attack and force King into obvious passing situations, that could disrupt the Yellow Jackets' offensive rhythm. Question 2, can Duke protect? Look, Duke's got an explosive passing game. They got to give Darian Mensah time to throw, but the offensive line has at times struggled in pass pro. He's been sacked 12 times, and that's a vulnerability that Georgia Tech's going to try to exploit. But they were disruptive against Virginia Tech. They sacked Kyron Drones 4 times. If Georgia Tech's defensive front can consistently pressure Mensah, it could be the most important factor in slowing down the Blue Devils' high-powered offense. I'm taking Duke. I think they're too disruptive on defense. I think their passing attack can cause some problems as well. Number 14, Oklahoma travels to Columbia, South Carolina. This game's 12:45 Eastern time on the SEC Network. Oklahoma reeling a bit, lost last week to the Texas Longhorns. They're 5-1, and Williams-Brice, it's not necessarily a great place for a get-right recipe because South Carolina's back is against the wall. They're 1-3 in the SEC. They're 3-3 overall. South Carolina's got to get things going and get things going quickly. If you look at where things are, this was a difficult defeat for Oklahoma. It was more than just a blemish on their record. It kind of exposed an offense that was struggling going into the game. Now we feel even worse about what we saw from Oklahoma offensively. The offensive line's a problem. The quarterback looked a little rusty. He looked very different from what we saw in the first couple weeks of the season. Look, there's a lot of similarities between these two teams. Both have excellent defensive personnel. The strength of the team might be the defensive front for both teams. And their offense's success depends almost exclusively on their quarterback playing at an outrageously high level. Look, John Mateer is super dynamic, made an ambitious return to the field just 17 days after undergoing surgery on his throwing hand, and the results were not great. It was his worst performance to date. He threw for only 202, had 3 costly picks. Sounds like he's full go for the South Carolina game, but there are questions about his physical health, timing, confidence, all these other things. And then for Lenora Sellers, there's very few players in college football that are more talented than him. He's been the bright spot on what's been kind of a challenging season for the Gamecocks so far. Now, statistically, it's not outrageously good, but he can take over the game in a moment's notice if you allow him to. Question 1, can Oklahoma's defense respond? It wasn't their fault they lost to the Texas Longhorns. Now, hear me out. They played the Texas team that had a mission. They were good. They ran the ball. They stayed patient. But this was a team that was one of the top defenses in the country coming in, and they gave up 16 points, because they gave up the punt return touchdown. Now, through 6 games, statistically, they're still one of the best in all of sport, right? They have allowed less than double digits per game. They're 4th in total defense. They're really good against the pass. And they can generate a lot of pressure too. They have 22 sacks. It's 2nd in the SEC. So Texas did a good job of staying in manageable 3rd down situations. And as a result, they converted 10 of 17 and they dominated time of possession. So this is a very aggressive group. And their primary weapon against a defense that's this aggressive might be to try to contain Lenora Sellers. So Brent Venables, the defensive player caller, he's going to have to decide, do they want to be aggressive or do they need to be maybe a little more conservative to account for Sellers getting out and breaking contain? Question 2, will Oklahoma's offense bounce back? Look, the biggest point of failure against Texas was a collapse along the offensive line. The unit was dominated at the point of attack. They had just 48 yards rushing on 30 carries. They had a couple of really inopportune penalties in that game as well. And as a result, they couldn't manufacture a lot on that side of the ball. In pass pro, they gave up a bunch of sacks. There was a ton of pressure on John Mateer. And this is not an isolated incident. The offensive line has kind of struggled to be consistent running the football all season long. Even in victories against lesser competition, they still haven't been good running the football. So their inability to win in the trenches had made this offense kind of one-dimensional, and it puts a lot of pressure on John Mateer's shoulders. So if he's at anything less than 100%, that could be problematic. Question 3. Can South Carolina get anything going offensively? Now, one issue for South Carolina's offense has been their offensive line. Like I said, these two teams are very similar. This unit has been hurt by injuries. They've underperformed. And right now, it's very tough to manufacture a lot going if your offensive line is not solid. They've given up a bunch of sacks. They have not created a ton of consistent run lanes. There were signs of progress last week, though. And if things start to move in the direction where I think they could go for South Carolina, if they stay really committed to the run game, they might be in a pretty good spot. But blocking this Oklahoma defensive line will be a huge problem. This was an offensive line group that just fired their offensive line coach after the loss to LSU. I'll take Oklahoma in a bounce back here, but it does not feel good laying the points on the road. I'll take the points. I still think Oklahoma's defense is legit. I also think this is going to be a game that's way under the total of 44. So I don't see either offense having a ton of success in this matchup. 3:30 Eastern time on CBS. It's the number 1 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes traveling to Madison, Wisconsin to play the Badgers in Camp Randall Stadium. Look, under Ryan Day, the Buckeyes are impervious to trap games. They're 46-0 against unranked opponents. Their struggles in Wisconsin are their offense. And Jeff Grimes, who I think is a really good coordinator, they've had injury issues. Their quarterback's been in and out. And if you look at the numbers statistically, scoring offense, total offense, rushing yards per game, passing yards per game, they're not where you want to be. They're all 112th or worse. How exactly will Wisconsin pull the upset here? That's what we're going to document. We're not going to break the game down. What does Wisconsin have to do to make this thing competitive? Number 1, they have to stop the run completely. That's one thing Wisconsin does very, very well is they're great against the run. They allow just under 100 yards a game and 3.5 a carry. So they have to sell out completely against the run. Number 2, they have to have a complete renaissance in the backfield defensively. Look, the secondary has been a huge point of concern. Their best players in the back end have regressed. Now they're facing an Ohio State passing attack that's arguably the most dangerous in the country. Julian Sands been outrageously efficient. Jeremiah Smith's amazing. Carnell Tate's amazing. They have to implement a bend, don't break zone scheme that kind of keeps everything in front of them and force the Buckeyes to make long, methodical drives to potentially bait Ohio State into some impatience or a possible red zone mistake. The chance of an upset in this game is less than 1%. I do think Wisconsin will cover. I know, I'm completely insane, but they're not going to win the game. I do think, however, they won't lose by more than 27 points. So take that one if you want to. Michigan State at Indiana. This game is on Peacock at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. 27.5's the line. The old brass spittoon is on the line here in this matchup. Following a win against Iowa earlier in the year, this is for Indiana, they kind of labeled that game as a potential trap. Curt Cignetti emphasized that his team needed to respond correctly. And after the Oregon win, he immediately pivoted, said, all right, this team needs to be humble, hungry, and ready to go against Michigan State. So how does Michigan State pull the upset? One, they somehow find a way to stop the run. The Hoosiers' rushing attack is a force, over 6 yards a carry, and they're going against Michigan State's most glaring weakness. And that's a run defense that has not been good away from home. If you look at the stats away from home, it's been somewhat catastrophic. They're allowing 1 million yards on the ground when they are not in East Lansing. Question two, and second way they have to execute to potentially pull the upset, Aiden Childs has to be out of his mind, and his dual threat mobility must be on full display. This is an Indiana defense that generate a lot of sacks. So Child's mobility is an absolute necessity. And then they have to win the red zone battle. So when Michigan State reaches the red zone, they must score touchdowns, not settle for field goals. And conversely, when Indiana's offense gets into the short, condensed area, the Spartans must stiffen and force field goal attempt. Winning red zone efficiency battle is a classic hallmark to major upsets, but the chance of an upset in this game, less than 1%. I don't even think that Michigan State's going to cover in this game. I'd lean towards Indiana there. Let's go next to 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. It's the 4th-ranked Texas A&M Aggies traveling to Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. And for the first time since 2013, this rivalry returns on campus, moving from that neutral site location there in Arlington to Reynolds Razorback Stadium is going to create an incredible atmosphere. And for A&M, this game represents a real road test, a possible trap game against a really desperate rival. Look, Mike Elko's amazing. Bobby Petrino is an offensive mastermind. If you look at what he did at Arkansas from 2008 to 2011, it was by far the best we've seen from Arkansas in the modern era of college football. He went 11-2 at one point, finished in the top 5 at one point, and he can coach offense. If you look at what he did at Louisville with Lamar Jackson, they are always going to make life very difficult for the opposing defense. So I love the matchup here between Bobby Petrino's brain offensively and Mike Elko's system defensively. Really cool coaching matchup in this one. Marcel Reed has been better this year. The completion percentage is not off the charts. He has fewer interceptions. I think he's made a lot of plays with his legs, and I've loved so far his contributions to the run game. However, he does miss some throws. That's where he's at. There is an off-target percentage of about 17+%. That's like 125th. He's a really, really talented young man, but there are misses. They're going to have misses in this game if Arkansas is going to potentially pull the outright upset. And Taylon Green on the other side, 6'6", 235, rare combination of size, top-end speed, acceleration, elusiveness. He's a true game breaker. He is the Arkansas offense. And if you look at his numbers, they are kind of showcasing the all-encompassing responsibility that he has to play at a high level to give his team a chance. Look, he's the team's leading rusher. He averaged over 7 yards a carry. He does have 5 interceptions, though. And he is a bit of a risk taker and will also miss some throws. And look at the matchup. Both offenses are very, very productive. However, they achieve their results in different ways. Arkansas is an explosive attack. They average over 500 a game. They have a 35-plus point per game average. That's top 30. Then A&M's offense, a little more methodical, a little more balanced, but also very effective as well. They're not going to have as many big plays created unless it's catch and run. But there is a significant difference on the defensive side of the ball. That's where the matchup's lopsided because Mike Elko's Aggies have a formidable defensive unit. They are outside of the Notre Dame game playing at a real high level. And really the first quarter of last week's game against Florida, they allowed less than 300 yards a game. In contrast, Arkansas's defense has been a huge liability. They're one of the worst in the FBS, giving up over 30 points per game and over 400 total yards per game. Both those rank worse than 116th in the country. Question 1. Will A&M's elite offensive line overpower Arkansas's porous defensive front? You have an experienced and powerful front that is the engine of the Aggie offense. Look, they allow a ground game that goes for nearly 200 a game. The Razorbacks' run defense, they're giving up 184. So advantage Aggies in that matchup. Question 2, can A&M's wide receivers create problems for Arkansas secondary? Now, Arkansas's pass defense has been a problem for a little while now. They were one of the worst in the SEC last year. They continue to struggle this year. They're giving up over 250 a game. The vulnerability may be exploited by an A&M receiving core that has been so good this season. The addition of Casey Concepcion from NC State and Mario Craver from Mississippi State, man, they have provided Marcel Reed with a really dynamic group of weapons to rely on throughout the course of the game. Question 3, can Talon Green avoid mistakes and take over the game? The game plan is going to definitely be designed to maximize Green's capabilities. That's what he is. It means a heavy dose of designed quarterback runs, a lot of run pass options, moving the pocket to put stress on the A&M linebackers and secondary. Green needs to be the focal point of every single offensive snap. He needs to go for over 350. He needs to have at least 4 touchdowns for the Razorbacks to have a chance. However, with all that pressure, all that weight you're putting on his shoulders, you might see an interception or 2. He's thrown 5 this year. You might see a sack or 2. He's taken 11 this year. I think I'll take the points here. I think Arkansas can score. I just don't see how they're going to stop Texas A&M's offense. So in a game that I think has a chance to become a track meet, I'll take the Aggies. They're more balanced, but I fully expect Arkansas to make it interesting and to score points in their own backyard. Top 10 matchup happening between the hedges where Ole Miss takes on the Georgia Bulldogs. It's 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Ole Miss arrives at Sanford Stadium sitting at 6-0, 3-0 in the SEC. Georgia trying to defend their home turf, 5-1, 3-1 in the SEC, the site of ESPN's College Game Day. And the last time they met in Athens, Georgia dominated, 52-17. That was back in 2023. However, last year, Ole Miss responded with a breakthrough win for Lane Kiffin, 28-10, and a powerful revenge game sitting there for Kirby Smart's Bulldogs. Lane Kiffin is amazing. He has elevated the Ole Miss program to unprecedented heights. They've already captured their first 11-win season. They have multiple 10-win campaigns. He's got 39 victories since 2021. That's the third most in the SEC, trailing only Georgia and Alabama. And for Kirby Smart, look, he's a defensive mastermind. Very few in the country make adjustments on the fly better than Kirby Smart and his defensive staff. The quarterback matchup is Trinidad Chambliss, a guy that nobody thought was going to be a star at this point of the season, but he's thrived here in the 4 starts that he's made and has now entered the Heisman Trophy conversation. He leads the entire SEC in passing yards per completion. He also is completing 65% of his passes, but the big thing to account for with him is his mobility. He's accumulated almost 300 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. So he can extend broken plays and create positive yardage with his legs at a moment's notice. Gunnar Stockton, on the other side, he's been great running the football as well. He's got 220 on the ground, 6 rushing touchdowns. He's kind of the vital component of this grinded out offensive identity, especially in the red zone. And the one time we saw him needing to take to the air against Tennessee, he answered by throwing for over 300, leading a game-winning drive to tie it, leading a game-winning drive in overtime. He showcased a lot of poise. He's also showcased a lot of leadership. There's a few injuries in this game that we need to be mindful of, and it starts with Georgia's offensive line. They've had several key contributors that are battling injuries. Juan Gaston, who has played quite a bit, started at tackle, started at guard, re-injured an ankle against Auburn, tried to return, but was ultimately forced out. So his status in this game, a little uncertain. We'll see if he's available. Ernest Green, the starting right tackle going into the season, has not played since the Tennessee game. He has a back issue. His availability remains in doubt. And then Monroe Freeling was banged up throughout the week last week. He played against Auburn, and that was a gutsy performance, big time. Even Kirby Smart said that it was. But if he's at less than 100%, that is a concern against a pretty talented defensive front. Question number 1, How will Georgia handle Ole Miss's tempo? Look, Lane Kiffin utilizes an up-tempo offense that does more than just force fatigue onto your defense. It's a strategic tool to create schematic advantages. It forces you to leave certain personnel on the field. So, for example, by rushing to the line of scrimmage, Ole Miss limits the opponent's ability to substitute personnel and forces them at times into simplified defensive alignments. This is specifically significant on third down. Georgia loves to substitute to get their best pass rushers on the field. And Coach Smart has acknowledged this tactic, saying that it's hard to get into the right play against Lane Kiffin because he'll run to the line and you won't be able to substitute to get your pass rushers on the field for obvious passing situations. So if Georgia's defenses experiences any lapse in communication or alignment due to the accelerated pace, it could result in some explosive plays that are at the core of what Ole Miss wants to be offensively. Question 2, how will Ole Miss's rushing attack fare against Georgia's run defense? Ole Miss's running back Keywan Lacey has been one of the best backs in the SEC this year. He's gone for nearly 608 touchdowns. And his performance against Washington State kind of shows you what he's capable of. He can make you miss. He's a long strider, but he's now going against a Georgia defensive front that is statistically elite. They allowed 91 rushing yards a game. They have unbelievable linebacker play in CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson. Those two lead the team in tackles, and they make plays from sideline to sideline. This is a strength-on-strength confrontation that will influence time of possession and field position. I don't think Ole Miss's offensive line is elite. I think they're improved, but I don't know if they'll be able to handle some of the weight and girth that we would anticipate from Georgia's defensive line. Question number 3, will Georgia's banged up offensive line be able to set the tone against an inconsistent defensive front? As we've talked about already in the injury report, Georgia's got some vulnerabilities along their offensive line, and that creates kind of an opportunity for Ole Miss's defense. And while Ole Miss's defense is nowhere near what they were last year, they are a group that can generate some pressure. They are a group that can create some negative plays. They have some edge defenders that are all rock solid, and Mon Mielen, Womack, Franklin. If they can consistently win one-on-one matchups against injured or inexperienced offensive tackles, they could disrupt the offensive rhythm and kind of force Gunnar Stockton into a costly error or maybe stall a drive when they're on the move. And statistically, Georgia should be able to run the football. Ole Miss gives up 160 a game on the ground, but I do think Ole Miss will completely sell out against the run in this game, which leads us to our next question. Question 4, can Georgia's passing attack expose Ole Miss's secondary? I think Gunnar Stockton's a really underrated thrower. Now, he's not Matt Stafford, but he's pretty accurate, and I think he makes really good decisions. And statistically, Ole Miss's secondary looks pretty decent. They're top 30 unit right now based on the numbers. But the defense has kind of been called in the first 6 games to protect them a little bit. And it's shown in how many rushing yards they've given up. So if they sell out against the run, can they lock down Zachariah Branch? Can they lock down Colby Young? Can they lock down these tight ends that I think are just poised for a breakout opportunity? So this Ole Miss secondary is still a bit of a question mark for me, but I do think they're going against a pretty underrated passing attack for the Georgia Bulldogs. And then question 5, can Trinidad Chambliss's game travel? He's been unbelievable through the first 4 starts, and this will be his first show on the road. He beat Wazoo, LSU, Tulane, and Arkansas. It's a different beast from an environment standpoint. I think he's got the head to do it, but if he gets popped a couple times early, will that have a bit of an effect on him? We'll see. I hope not, but we'll see, because that is a question that we have as of this moment, because we have not seen him in a hostile setting, not like he's going to see this weekend when he walks between the hedges. I'm taking Georgia. I'm going to lay the points in this game. I love what I've seen so far from Georgia in stopping the run. I also think Georgia is an improving bunch on the perimeter. I don't think they're elite in the secondary, but I think they're improving in the secondary. I think Ole Miss could become a little one-dimensional, and I also think that Georgia will be able to run the football and create some matchup advantages with their wide receivers on some downfield throws. The Texas Tech Red Raiders travel to Tempe. This game's 4 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. Biggest question, this one is very simple. What's the status of the quarterbacks? And so we can talk about offensive line, defensive line, receivers, running backs, all this stuff. I just want to know what's going on with Baron Morton and what's going on with Sam Levitt. We'll start with Baron Morton since he's on the road. Look, he's the starting quarterback, listed right now as kind of day-to-day. He's had a nagging leg injury. It happened a few weeks back. It's popped up again against Kansas, the third time this season where he's been forced to exit the game due to injury. And the second time it's been involving his leg. Initial x-rays came back negative. There's no structural damage, but there is a little bit of a question mark about his availability. And knowing that it's been a bit reoccurring and specifically on the same leg, it introduces the possibility of re-injury and, more importantly, limited mobility. And that's a concern against an Arizona State defense that's pretty good when it comes to getting after the quarterback. So a less mobile Baron Morton would be a stationary target against an aggressive pass rush. Now, the backup for Texas Tech, Will Hammond, he's already demonstrated the ability to go into a game and play really well. He entered in relief of Morton multiple times, but was instrumental in securing the road victory at Utah a few weeks ago. He led 4 scoring drives in the second half. And he's a dual threat guy. He's got a strong arm. Coach McGuire said that they will adjust the offensive scheme to adapt to his skill set if, in fact, he is the guy in this matchup. But on the other side, there is a pretty significant drop from starter to backup. Look, Sam Levitt, he missed the game against Utah. Undisclosed injury described right now as week to week. He's super dynamic as a dual threat player. Now, the passing numbers haven't necessarily blown you away this year, but he's rushed for nearly 305 touchdowns on the ground. And that run game is potent. The drop off from Sam Levitt to his backup, 7th-year senior Jeff Sims, proved to be catastrophic in the loss to Utah. Sims completed just 18 of 38 for 124, did not complete a single pass of more than 20 yards. So with Sims at the helm, the offense became kind of one-dimensional and a bit predictable. They just couldn't manufacture an awful lot. As a result, they were living in 3rd and long situations throughout the course of that game. So the absence of Baron Morton or Sam Levitt, it completely alters what this game might look like. Should both backups play, Texas Tech has a significant advantage due to superior depth and the adaptable scheme that they've utilized. Question 2, can Arizona State establish the run? Right now, they're 10th in the FBS in rushing attempts a game, 22nd in rushing yards. They lean heavy on the ground game. And their primary weapon in this backfield is Raleigh Brown. He's dynamic, got a lot of speed, got a lot of patience, but it runs directly into the teeth of Texas Tech's dominant run defense. The Red Raiders are 2nd in the country against the run. They are 1st in yards per carry. They are suffocating up front. If Sam Levitt is out, then lay the points with the Red Raiders. I just don't know how Arizona State can be competitive if, in fact, Sam Levitt is unavailable. The Oregon Ducks travel to Rutgers. This game's 6:30 Eastern time on Big Ten Network. Sold out stadium there in Piscataway. This is Rutgers' homecoming and has been designated a Scarlet Out. Now, Oregon's reeling from the first loss of the season, snapped an 18-game home winning streak, Autzen Stadium, and was kind of in that game. Some uncharacteristic vulnerabilities were showcased to the world. And a logistical challenge in this matchup is a 2,500 cross-country flight, 2,500-mile cross-country flight. So what's the path to the upset? All right, number 1, Rutgers' passing game must play out of their mind. They have a pretty potent passing attack. They're averaging over 300 a game. Ethan Kaliakmanis has been really good in reuniting with Kirk Soraka, has thrown for nearly 1,800 yards and 11 touchdowns in the first 6 games. He also has really good weapons on the perimeter. They've emerged as a solid duo of wide receivers with Duff and Strong. These guys can go. So if you got 2 legitimate guys with size and with skill and with ability, they might be able to create some problems on the perimeter for Oregon. And Scarlet Knight's offensive line, though, this is the problem. That's the weakness. If they can provide Kaliakmanis with just enough time, he might have the weapons to challenge a really good secondary. The good news is Oregon only has 10 sacks this year. That's 96. So the pass rush shouldn't be a massive issue, but this pass defense is statistically elite. They allow less than 140 yards a game to the air. The pass rush for Rutgers must affect Dante Moore. That's pathway number 2. Now, the Hoosiers dominated the line of scrimmage. They sacked Dante Moore 6 times. They held that explosive Ducks offense to just 267 yards. And Rutgers defensive front, their edge rusher, Eric O'Neal, transfer from James Madison, he's got to be unbelievable in this game to kind of force more off his spot and force a couple errant throws. And then number 3 for Rutgers, they have to get off the field on 4th down. Look, Dan Lanning, he's hyper-aggressive 4th down strategy. And it's all about maximizing every possession. Now, this can be a game-winning weapon like it was against Penn State, or it could be a fatal flaw, as we saw in the past in losses to Washington a couple years ago. So the likelihood of an upset in this game, I have it at about 5%. I don't think it's likely that an upset occurs, but I would not be surprised if Rutgers keeps it close. Let's go next to the Texas Longhorns traveling to Lexington, Kentucky. This is 7 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN. This is a trap game now. Trap game for the Longhorns. And you look at the scheduling. It's the 3rd consecutive contest away from Austin. Super physical game, an emotional game. Winning the Red River game against Oklahoma last week. And there are some aspects of this with Kentucky, 2-3 overall, 0-3 start in the SEC. They are battling to keep their season afloat. They are currently in a 2-game losing streak. They lost badly to South Carolina. They lost badly to Georgia consecutive weeks. And the program has kind of struggled to find their footing, especially on offense, and is facing a lot of pressure to show life against a quality opponent. So how does an upset happen? Number 1, Texas's offensive line reverts back to its performance against Florida. With Brad White, the defensive coordinator for the Wildcats, he's got to design a game plan that is focused on exploiting some of the inconsistencies of the Texas offensive line. This is a key tactical mismatch in the game, potentially, if Kentucky's defensive front, which has some impactful transfers like defensive tackle David Gusta, edge rusher Mikewees Humphrey-Grace, if those guys can get after the quarterback and hit Arch, then the defensive playbook, you've got to think there's going to be twists, stunts, moves, blitzes designed to confuse the interior offensive lineman and apply pressure in Arch Manning's face. Number 2, Texas continues to have problems with penalties. Look, they're one of the more penalized teams in the country. They're 122nd right now in the FBS. They're averaging 8 penalties a game. The problem is on one side of the ball, with 71% of their penalties being on offense. So if they have penalties and they're behind the sticks, that could be problematic. So Texas, they got to clean things up on the road if they want to avoid a tricky game. And then number 3, Kentucky's offense has to have long, time-consuming drives. Now, the offensive coordinator, Bush Hampton, his goal is not to score 40 points. Well, it is. I mean, if he gets there, great. But if he can possess the ball for over 35 minutes, that would be big. And the game plan will be built around their running back, Seth McGowan, who is their most effective offensive player. And through 5 games, he's averaging over 5 a carry. He's a very physical runner. He's got to be the workhorse. He's got to grind out 4 and 5 yards per carry to kind of keep this offense in manageable 3rd down situations. And the offensive line, a lot of experienced upperclassmen and transfers, they must not get beat at the point of attack. So success will not be measured with explosive runs, but how many times can they get to 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 1, so that they can convert and sustain long, clock-consuming drives. And Cutter Boley, the quarterback, he's got to be a game manager, not a hero. His primary directive is ball security. And while his completion percentage is not great, his touchdown interception ratio not great, he's got to have a lot of high percentage throws, screen passes to Kendrick Law, design rollouts to get the ball out of his hands quickly. The goal is to shorten the game and limit the total number of possessions and keep Arch Manning and this Texas offense on the sideline. The percentage chance that Kentucky knocks off the Longhorns, I'm going to put it at about 10%. The USC Trojans travel to South Bend, Indiana. Notre Dame about a 9.5, 8.5, 9.5 point favorite. This game's 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. The 96th meeting between Notre Dame and USC. The jeweled shillelagh is on the line. I love this game. I love these two teams. I'm a college football history buff. Ever since I was a kid, one of the earliest games I ever remember was watching this game. I lived in Los Angeles, California at the time. I was probably 6 years old. I remember watching this game and just being all in and being like, I love football. I don't know what's going on or what a first down is or what a touchdown is, but I love football. These two helmets are awesome. And these jerseys are cool. And them doing this, dun, 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 is about as cool as it gets. Like this game. I just freaking love it. Obviously, Iron Bowl, the number 1 for me. Texas OU up there. SC Notre Dame up there, just as a college football fan. I absolutely love it. Like Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman, tough start to the season, right? 0-2 start, excruciating losses to Miami and A&M. Those two teams are legit, right? They haven't collapsed. They've since ripped off 4 straight wins. They've showcased a resilient and increasingly dominant defensive identity, and they have completely suffocated their last 2 opponents in Boise State and NC State, allowing just 7 points each in those 2 contests. And for Lincoln Riley's USC, yeah, they had a disappointing 34-32 road loss to Illinois. That was a defeat that reignited all the same criticisms about the program's toughness and all this stuff. Well, their response was resounding. They go and take it to a Michigan team in a 31-13 victory that was hard-nosed and just a terrific performance. One other note about this rivalry, it's been documented in the summer that Lincoln Riley isn't a fan of this being a permanent fixture on the schedule. Marcus Freeman then went a layer deeper and said, well, this is an important game and we got to have it. We root for this game to stay put. So a little extra layer dating back to the summer of this rivalry. One of the best quarterback matchups of the weekend pits Jaden Mayava, the redshirt junior for USC. He's been perfect for Lincoln Riley's systems, operating the system at a high level, a lot of precision, super elite, pushing the ball down the field. He's thrown for 1,850 yards, over 72% completion, 13 touchdowns against 2 picks, and the yards per attempt, man, they push the ball. They really push the ball. They put a lot of pressure on you, and their screen game's awesome too. CJ Carr, he's been thrust in the starting role and has performed so well, demonstrating a poise beyond his years, and he has thrown for a bunch of yards at over 1,600, 13 touchdowns, just 3 picks. One of those was tipped. Like, he's played great. There's been a lot of flashes so far that has made him that high-level prospect that we all anticipated that he would become. Some notable injuries in this game. Look, SC, their running back situation is a bit in flux. Wayman Jordan, who went into the Big Ten games this past weekend, is 3rd in rushing. A little tightrope surgery on his ankle, going to be out 4-6 weeks. His primary backup, Eli Sanders, knee injury. That's probably season ending. So in comes a walk-on King Miller, who sees the opportunity against Michigan. More on him in just a moment. And for Notre Dame, the game against NC State, they suffered an injury to their starting center, Ashton Craig. So now it's going to be redshirt sophomore Joe Otting, who's talented but relatively inexperienced, being there in the most pivotal position on the offensive line, especially when you take into account you have a relatively inexperienced quarterback back there directing traffic. You also have had some injuries. Jaden Greathouse missed last week. Veteran defensive back Devontae Smith. Those guys are all kind of questionable at this point. So check the injury report for Notre Dame. See if they're going to be at 100% for this one outside of their center, who will obviously be out. Question number 1. Can Notre Dame's resurgence slow a dynamic passing attack? Look, this Fighting Irish defense under Chris Ash has really adjusted. And while their season-long stats show that the unit is fine, not great, the narrative is a bit misleading because when you take into account how they started, particularly against the pass, where they were among the worst in college football, they have undergone a significant transformation over the last 3 games. Against Arkansas, Boise, and NC State, they've allowed just 9 points per game. And it's been their ability to, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, manufacture takeaways. 5 interceptions in their first 4 games. Well, they've collected 7 in their last 2. And their season-long interception percentage is now 4th best in the country. And that's a testament to a secondary that's playing with a renewed confidence and aggression. And the surge has been led by some breakout performers. Boubacar Traore has developed into a legit NFL edge rusher. He's been dominant with sacks and the forced fumble. In the secondary, they inserted Tay Johnson in at starting safety. He's kind of stabilized the back end, and he led the team in tackles against NC State and has brought a steadying presence. Well, they're going against an offense that is outstanding. Mayava's been terrific. His weaponry on the outside, leading by Makai Lemon, has been one of the most dominant offensive players in the country, 700 yards receiving thereabouts, and 6 touchdowns so far. He's complemented by the length of Jacoby Lane, who at 6'4" can be a huge red zone threat and is without question the future of this team with his size-speed combination. Question 2, can USC stop the run? Now, the unit's been stout against the run. Statistically, not bad, giving up 108 rushing yards a game. They're 26th in yards per rush. You do have to factor in sacks, and they've been a little bit more susceptible on the edges and have allowed some gashes in the run game. And under Marcus Freeman and offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock, Notre Dame football is a blue-collar unit, right? The offense wants to be built around a powerful and diverse run game that is designed to kind of wear down opponents and create favorable play-action opportunities for their young quarterback. Now, they run the ball about 55% of their offensive snaps. And in their 4-game winning streak, they've been really riding that powerful running back duo of Jeremiah Love, who is a workhorse, and the super explosive, equally dynamic Jadarian Price. Those two guys are about as good of a 1-2 punch as you'll find in college football. And they're going to try to stress the edges in this game, I would assume. Question number 3, can USC's pass rush have an impact against a really good passing attack? CJ Carr has been outstanding here these first few weeks of the season. However, he got hit a bunch against Miami, and that had an impact. So USC as a group, they want to get after the quarterback, but these wide receivers with Faison and Fields and Pauling and the ever-present Raritan at tight end is a good group as far as weapons are concerned, and USC's pass defense has been a significant liability. They're allowing nearly 250 a game. They're not been good on a yards per attempt basis as well. But one thing to account for with USC is that their pass rush, I'd argue it's probably a top 5 unit right now in the Power 5. When it comes to pass rush, they have 20 sacks, which is 7th, but they apply a lot of pressure throughout the course of the game as well. Question 4, can USC's run game continue to impress? Now, the injuries to their top 2 running backs are brutal. The 1-2 punch with Jordan and Sanders were 2 of the best in the country. But if last week proved anything, it's that they have depth, albeit unlikely depth. Hello, King Miller, a walk-on freshman who gets thrust into the game against Michigan, goes for 158 and a touchdown. Well, now he's thrust into the lead role, and he's got some big playability. I mean, he had 40-plus yard runs in that game against Michigan. He's got some open field juice. Now, the depth behind him is pretty young. Brian Jackson, Harry Dalton, gifted players, but not quite ready for prime time, one would assume. But then again, who would have thought King Miller was ready for prime time last week? And he was great. So we'll see exactly what happens against the stout run defense, the top 25 run defense for Notre Dame. They give up just over 100 yards a game. Question 5, can Notre Dame finish in the red zone? Because that's where USC has been very good this year. They'll give you yardage between the 20s. But USC's defense has been great when the field starts to condense. They are number 2 right now in red zone defense in all of college football. They allow opponents to score on just 60% of their red zone possessions. They're behind Ohio State, but we all know how good Ohio State is, especially in the red zone. They allow touchdowns on just 47% of the red zone drives. That's a top 20 number. So this efficiency, when the field condenses, is important. And it's going to be important in this game when I think it could become a bit of a track meet for them to score 7s, not 3s, when that field starts to shrink. I'm going to take Notre Dame, but I am going to take the points here. I think this line is way too high, which means Notre Dame will probably cover, but I like SC a lot. I think they can score with them. I, however, think that Notre Dame's resurgence defensively will force a mistake or two, which gives them the win. I like Notre Dame, but take the points. It'll be close in what I think will be a very high-scoring game. We'll go next to the 3rd Saturday in October. The Tennessee Volunteers travel to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Line is about 9.5 in favor of the Tide. This game's 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. It's the 108th meeting of one of college football's most storied rivalries. Both teams enter the contest with identical 5-1 records. This is a high-stakes cushion game for the college football playoff. Loser still alive, but that ice gets thin. Winner, they have some wiggle room down the stretch in the latter half of the schedule. Look, Josh Heupel's been at Tennessee for 5 years. He's done an amazing job. And Kalen DeBoer, year number 2, you see the progress that's been made with this team as a whole. Look, Josh Heupel has really revitalized this team and their standing in the series. They've won 2 of the last 3. They also snapped Alabama's dominant 15-game winning streak that spanned from 2007 to 2021. Now, despite this recent resurgence, a significant hurdle remains for the Volunteers. They have not won in Tuscaloosa since 2003. That was a really memorable 5-overtime thriller. Great quarterback matchup in this one with Joey Aguilar, who's really comfortable operating this high-paced offense. He possesses arm talent. He also can throw the ball vertically. The one question with him is there has at times been a propensity for turnovers. He's got 5 picks through 6 games this year. He threw 24 picks over 2 seasons at Appalachian State. So he's got to be smart against a ball-hawking secondary for the Crimson Tide. Ty Simpson through 6 games has been remarkable and seems to get better and better and better as the season goes along. His completion percentage is now well over 70%. He's got a 16-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. That one interception was on a 4th and 1, basically a punt against Vanderbilt. And he has been among the nation's elite from a QBR standpoint. He's been really consistent, and he's thrown multiple touchdowns in every game this season. Couple injuries of note in this game. Running back Jam Miller, he's the team's leading rusher, suffered a concussion in the 4th quarter against Missouri. His status for Saturday is at this time a little questionable, and that could be big because he was the first Alabama running back to eclipse the 100-yard mark this season when they went for over 100 against Vandy. His absence would thrust backups Kevin Riley and Daniel Hill into a larger role and remove a key component of this offense. Another guy to keep an eye on is Ryan Williams. He clearly wasn't at 100% against Missouri, had an injury in the week's game prior to, and hopefully he can practice and kind of get back to 100%, but anything less than 100% from Ryan Williams does limit some of the possibilities for explosives from Alabama's passing attack. And then wide receiver Derek Meadows, he suffered a concussion against Missouri on a violent targeting play. And you also already have a couple wideouts that are down. So this is a position group that, while super talented, is a little bit thin at the moment. So keep an eye on those injuries. For Tennessee, they've been navigating some issues in the defensive backfield throughout the entire season. Jermod McCoy is an All-American, and he's still recovering from an ACL. It's unlikely that he'll be able to go at this point. And then Ricky Gibson, their other starting corner, he's been out as well. It's forced younger players, it's forced less experienced players into significant roles. And that is a bit of a vulnerability there on the perimeter when it comes to Tennessee's secondary. So they got to make sure that those guys play well against a really good wide receiver corps. Deshaun Bishop, their running back, also got a little banged up in the game against Arkansas last week. They've also been without their tight end, Ethan Davis, the last couple games, but hopefully he can be back in this one. Question number 1, can Ty Simpson continue his surgical precision? Look, since Ryan Grubb has arrived as the offensive coordinator, they have really put a premium on timing, rhythm, intelligent decision-making. They also put a ton on his plate in the pre-snap with adjustments and checks at the line of scrimmage. The interception total is not an accident, but it's a product of a system that values protecting the football and putting a lot on the quarterback's plate, and they've given him a little more as the season goes along because they're starting to build that trust between offensive coordinator and quarterback. Question 2, will Aguilar's aggression continue to pay dividends? Look, anyone that's watched Josh Heupel's offense, it's a scheme that is about tempo and running the football and creating vertical passing concepts. Look, this is an offense that is designed to create one-on-one matchups and generate explosive plays, which involves occasionally taking a few more chances down the field. And Aguilar, I think, has delivered on a lot of those promises coming into the season. He's been excellent for them. He's got to be excellent in this game as well because he's a ball-hawking secondary that can turn you over in a heartbeat. They had 2 picks last week, but it could have been 4 had they actually caught the football that was right in their hands. Question 3, how will Alabama's offensive line perform against a really good defensive line for Tennessee? Look, the offensive line's been a little up and down throughout the season. If you look at the game against Missouri, there were a few times in which Ty Simpson was getting hit or his drop back was being disrupted. The offensive rhythm was occasionally disrupted, and there were a few empty possessions because the offensive line couldn't hold up in protection. Now, the health of Jam Miller forces another critical question to Alabama's offensive identity. Without him, can Alabama establish that physical rushing attack that they need to kind of protect their quarterback and control the game? Now, their record in tough games this year is a bit mixed. They didn't run the ball very well against Florida State. They didn't run the ball for a ridiculous yard per carry average against Georgia. So they have to establish the run, and that's not just a preference, that's just what they need to be as they move forward. Now they're going against a Tennessee defensive front that has a lot of great athletic difference-making players that excel at creating negative plays. They're among the nation leader in sacks and tackles for loss. They have 12 different defensive linemen that have recorded at least one tackle for loss this season. They're second in the FBS with 26 sacks. Look, Tim Banks, their defensive coordinator, he is really good. He must decide, do you want to bring the extra pressure against a vulnerable offensive line? But at that point, you risk leaving your own secondary in possible one-on-ones against a really talented receiver group. So the outcome could be kind of a high-stakes dice roll that could very well determine the outcome of the game. Question 4, how effective will Tennessee be running the football? But Tennessee's ground game is central to their offensive philosophy. And I think Deshaun Bishop has a chance to become a star. He had a great performance last week against Arkansas, did get a little banged up, but here's hoping he'll be ready to roll. And this offense, they have a ton of success when they eclipse over 200 yards rushing. They've done it 200 yards rushing on the ground 34 times in his tenure. They are 32-2 when doing so. So reaching that benchmark will be a primary objective for the Volunteers offense. Question 5, can Alabama create a pass rush? Now, Alabama's defense front, they have really good players. LT Overton is an excellent player, but they'll be tasked with a very difficult challenge of trying to generate pressure without resorting to high-risk blitz packages that could leave their secondary on islands against really good wide receivers. Now, the line play is going to be interesting. Now, Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, much like Tim Banks, will they gamble with blitzes against an offensive line that has been very good up to this point? This has been a bit of a fortress for Joey Aguilar at times. Against Arkansas, they did not surrender a single sack. That's the third time this year in which they've quarterback has been kept clean throughout an entire game. Question number 6, who will control the tempo of the game? These are two very different philosophies. Look, Josh Heupel, their tempo and is a primary strategic weapon. They want to operate at a blistering pace. They want to create confusion. They want to prevent substitutions. They want to exploit mismatches. Their ability to score is well documented. These opening drive scores, man, they just go right down the field. I think they're like 2.5 minutes or less every single time. And Alabama's defensive discipline, communication, conditioning, it's going to be under relentless assault from the opening whistle. Now, the most effective defense against Tennessee's offense may, in fact, be Alabama's own offense. In their win against Missouri, for example, they held the ball for over 38 minutes. If you look at their ball control against Vanderbilt and other teams this year, this is an offense that wants to control the ball, that wants to have long, methodical drives, because it not only helps in scoring points, it also keeps explosive playmakers from the other team on the sideline, neutralizing what might be a real strength. I will not call this game or make a pick on this game. I'll be in the booth alongside Sean McDonough with Molly McGrath on the call for ABC. Finally, in the nightcap, one of the great rivalries in the sport. It's the Utah Utes taking on the BYU Cougars. It's 8 o'clock Eastern time on Fox. It's the Holy War, one of the best, most intense rivalries in all of college football. Utah established near control of this from 2010 to 2019. However, BYU, they've been good in the last two meetings, 21 and 24. BYU has kind of relit the competitive fire, and this could be a big one because BYU enters this game undefeated. They are higher ranked than their rivals on the other side of the state. They possess home field advantage, and right now Utah is a favorite. So kind of crazy with lines all the way from 2.5 to 3.5, kind of all over the place in favor of the Utes. Now, they lost earlier this season to Texas Tech, but they are probably a little bit more battle-tested than this BYU team, who has played maybe a comparatively slightly weaker slate of opponents. So Kyle Whittingham, Kalani Sitake, two of the great guys in the sport. Honestly, it's one of those where it's like whoever wins, like I root for the people in this one. Two of my favorite coaches going in all of college football. Quarterback matchup, Devin Dampier, super dynamic, dual threat, significant part of the rushing attack. He's gone for over 250 on the ground himself against Bear Bachmeier. Highly touted freshman, is making his first start in the rivalry as a runner right now. He's very, very good. Did make a couple mistakes last week, but battled back as the game went along and made the plays down the stretch to give BYU a hard-fought victory against the Arizona Wildcats. Question 1, how will Utah's rushing attack handle BYU's defensive front? Look, Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator, they kind of utilize a bit of a positionless spread offense designed to create mismatches and create problems for the defense. The scheme is predicated, though, on a really powerful and versatile rushing attack. They're going to use multiple sets, multiple personnels to try to create formations and dictate matchups in the run game. And the Utes, they're among the nation's elite. They're averaging over 240 yards a game on the ground. Now, their primary ball carriers are Wayshawn Parker and Corey Rogers. They provide a formidable 1-2 punch, but don't forget Devin Dampier. He can always contribute in the run game as well. And BYU's front, very stout against the run. Just over 100 yards per game given up, less than 3 yards a carry. The bedrock of this defensive identity will be to hold up along the line of scrimmage against a really good offensive line. Question 2, can BYU create explosive plays? Bachmeier is young, but he's got good weapons. The passing game, while secondary to what they want to be, they have really reliable weapons. I love Chase Roberts. They got some other guys, got quality tight ends. The Utes, they excel in limiting explosive plays. They've been very good against the pass. They're a top 11 group nationally in passing defense. Question 3, how will Utah contain LJ Martin? Look, Utah's defense is formidable, especially against the pass. But the rush defense, that is a potential area for BYU to try to lean into. The Utes are allowing 140 rushing yards a game. That's outside the top 60, which is surprising. And the vulnerability kind of lines with what BYU's primary offensive identity is. They rush for nearly 240 a game as well. That's top 12 in the country. They go for nearly 6 a carry. That's in the top 10. Through 5 games, Martin's gone for 490 and 3 touchdowns. And the matchup, BYU's powerful ground game against Utah's middling run defense, is the Cougars' most significant advantage and their clearest path to controlling the tempo and the possible outcome of the game. And then question 4, does this game come down to a key turnover or special teams play? I feel like every time I watch Utah and or BYU, it's a turnover, it's a special teams play, it's a return, it's a blocked kick that ultimately gives them an extra possession, that gives them a boost. In a game in which the teams are very, very close and both are built in a similar way, I think one pivotal mistake, one key special teams play could ultimately determine the outcome. I'm taking the Utah Utes. I'm going to lay the points. I think their offensive line can neutralize an excellent defensive line for the BYU Cougars. Finally, it's our Giant Killer segment. You can just put these teams in a 14 parlay, however you want to play it. Washington +6 at Michigan. Washington's still a very good football team. And Michigan, there are some vulnerabilities there that concern me, especially with their passing attack. South Carolina +5.5 over Oklahoma. I think they can keep it close at home. I think that game's got a chance to be very competitive. I think South Carolina's defensive line can make life very difficult on the Oklahoma Sooners offense. Mississippi State getting 8.5 at Florida. I think Florida's a quality team, but I think Mississippi State is one of the most improved teams in college football. I wouldn't be surprised if they make that one very interesting there in the swamp. And then USC catching the points against Notre Dame feels like a big number there for the USC Trojans. I think they keep it close in what should be a high-scoring affair. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Continue to encourage you to go and subscribe to the podcast. Check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. You can check out our clips, individual breakdowns, shorts, all this other stuff on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack intern, Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day and enjoy the weekend. It's Always College Football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.